If the members of the audience would please take their seats, then we'll know if we can bring additional people in who may still be waiting. We're about to begin here as soon as we get our witness here. There she is. Okay.
Or something out of your binder.
Committee will come to order. The next person to be recognized is the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Richards, thank you for your testimony. I'm going to try to take the emotion out of it and stick strictly to the numbers. Earlier you said you need to consider the source, so everything that I'll be quoting comes from Planned Parenthood. It is my understanding that 3%, according to your website and your testimony today, 3% of the services that Planned Parenthood offers are abortion services. Is that correct? 3%. Of your total services, 3%.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. 3% of the services delivered, of the total services.
But yet you say that you don't have the total amount of money, you can't give this committee the total amount of money that's you make or receive for abortions. Is that correct?
It's because the national office doesn't, as you know, or may not know, but the national office doesn't provide health care services. 59 affiliates provide a variety of health care services, so that would be, every single organization would be different.
But your affiliates gather that information, so you would have access to that.
Well, I'm sure they have it. I don't have it myself.
Okay, but how do you come up with 3%? So
that's the number of service, because
let me ask the question. Okay. 2.7 million women and men are served by Planned Parenthood, according to your testimony. Is that correct? 2.7.
That's correct.
Annually, you provide, according to your report, 327,000 plus abortions last year, according to your annual report. I do the math. 2.7 million people, 327,000 abortions. That comes up to 12%. So how do you get 3%? And these are your numbers. Why is it not 12%?
Well, because people come to us some people come to us more than once, and they come to us for different services, and some people come to us and they need a Pap smear, they need a variety of services.
Let's go on a little bit further, because I'm having a real trouble coming to this. And if you would put up the graph on, this is a tax return from one of your affiliates in Rochester, Syracuse region. If you could read for me line 2B. What does that say? What is the designation there?
Pregnancy termination.
Okay, and the dollar amount next to pregnancy termination there is how much?
Again, I've never seen this before, so I'm simply reading what you're asking me to read. 1,424,275. I'm assuming.
All right, so $1,424,000 for pregnancy termination, according to your affiliate's tax return.
One affiliate, correct.
Okay, so wouldn't you have tax returns for all your affiliates where we could get this information?
Well, I know that we have provided.
Okay, because here's my concern. If you take the number, that 1.4 million, and divide it into the total revenue of a little over 5 million, that would indicate revenues of almost 28% for abortions.
Well, I
so
think
where does the 3%?
Services, and I think you're mixing services and revenue, because obviously above the line says family planning, 3,700,000 718,474.
But wouldn't you think the 3% is a little bit misleading?
No,
if
actually, we
28%.
calculate, I mean, we are,
Well,
I'd say we are the most highly regulated organization probably in this country.
well, I would
We-
disagree with that, but let me
Well, anyway,
ask you.
but we're very transparent about our numbers.
I've got this for one of your affiliates. Will you provide this same kind of documentation for all your affiliates to this committee?
I believe we actually already have.
No, you haven't.
Well, I'm happy to speak to the chairman because we have, I
This
believe.
is the only one that had it. Will you today, yes or no, provide this for all your affiliates?
We have produced all 990, okay, well, we just have a disagreement of opinion, and I'm happy to talk to the
Well, it's not a
chairman.
disagreement. Will you provide the number of
We have already
revenue?
provided the 990s for all of our affiliates, and so
But
that's
it
what,
didn't outline it like this.
well, maybe perhaps,
So are
I
you
don't,
saying that you don't keep track of it?
you said that, I did not say
No,
that.
I'm asking you, do you keep track of it?
Every single affiliate in Planned Parenthood meets with all the laws and regulations, and they file their 990s, and we've
That's a great
provided.
answer to a question I
Chairman,
didn't
we've-
ask.
we've
Would
provided-
you provide it to this committee?
I don't exactly know what it is, since I've said to you
Okay, well, I'll tell you what it is.
we've provided the
The
990s.
revenue that you, Planned Parenthood, derives from abortions.
And I have said to you, we have provided, and we have been extremely cooperative with this committee and the other 3 committees, and we have provided all the 990s, all the annual statements of our affiliates, and if there's anything after, I'm happy to talk to the staff here about what else is needed that we're not providing, because I really believe we have gone above and beyond in providing everything that's been requested of us.
Okay, my time's
And it's-
expired. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And now recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Boyle, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank Ms. Richards for the manner in which you've conducted yourself today. There was one answer you've given that surprised me when Ranking Member Cummings asked what the favorite part of your job was. I assumed you were going to say sitting here for 3 hours answering these questions from members of Congress. But I do want to focus, a couple of these statistics have been cited before, a couple have not, but I don't think they've strongly led to a very important point, and that would be the consequences of the legislative action that we're proposing. So let me just briefly go through. As has been cited, there are approximately 2.5, actually exactly 2.7 million women and men that Planned Parenthood see every year, correct?
I'm going to give that to you. Correct.
And of that, 1.5 million of those patients receive services through Title X, the nation's family planning program, right?
Well, I think that, and I'm not, let me make sure that I want to make sure I answer you correctly. About 1.6 million of our patients are either come to us through some federal program, either Title X or the Medicaid program. But a number of them are Title X, yes, Title X recipients.
Well, contraceptive services at Title X centers annually prevent 1.2 million unintended pregnancies, which would result significantly in 590,000 unplanned births, 400,000 abortions, and 190,000 miscarriages. So in a country with approximately 1 million abortions a year, what we're talking about is without such Title X services, the services that Planned Parenthood provides and clearly constitutes the majority of your work, the number of abortions each year in the U.S. would be approximately 40% higher.
Yes.
I think that the consequences of what we're talking about haven't fully been laid out, not just in terms of the cancer screenings and the treatment of STDs, but also, ironically, in what would be inevitably an increase in the number of unintended pregnancies and abortions.
That's correct, and it's interesting because right now there's such exciting research happening with better contraceptives. Young women now can get long-acting reversible contraceptives. They don't even have some. I know I've been questioned about why in some cases we have fewer visits in some areas, and one of the exciting things is now you actually sometimes don't have to come back to Planned Parenthood every month to get birth control pills because we can provide them for 6 months, or you can get a longer-acting method. And in the states that have really pioneered this work to provide women any birth control, we're seeing dramatic drops in both unintended pregnancy rate and abortion rates.
I also, and by the way, I think that's something that we can all celebrate, and maybe the focus should be more on how best to provide women the health care they need, and that actually this is something where we can build common ground. I did also want to point out, and I think you cited this before, and it's only been mentioned once in these 3 hours, according to the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, if this legislation goes through, 390,000 women would lose their access to health care.
That's correct.
Where else could they turn?
Well, I think that's the difficulty in that, you're right, I appreciate you bringing back up the CBO study, because it's really important. As I said earlier, there are some areas of the country where we are the only safety net family planning provider. There's other areas where the Medicaid folks who are taking Medicaid patients won't take anymore, because as has been discussed by everyone, Medicaid payments don't necessarily pay for services. But the other thing I'd like to just emphasize is that there are women and young people that choose Planned Parenthood even though they have other options, because we provide very high-quality health care, particularly family planning services, that they may not be able to get anywhere else without judgment, without shame.
Per one of the points you were making in terms of the population that Planned Parenthood serves, the statistic I have, and I think that you've cited, is that at least 78% of Planned Parenthood's health care patients have incomes of 150% of the income of the poverty level or less.
That's correct. That's correct.
So it's pretty clear we're talking about people who don't have a great deal of options in anything given their income.
Well, and to me, that is the point, is that I believe low-income women in this country should have all the same options to have high-quality, affordable health care as every other woman.
Thank you. And with 11 seconds left, I'll yield back.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. DeSantis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Richards, if a child survives an abortion attempt, should it be given nourishment and medical care?
I've never heard of such a circumstance happening.
Really?
Yes. I mean,
So if it did
certainly
happen, you would say it would
well,
be
I can say at
entitled to it or
Planned
not?
Parenthood, I'm aware of no instance where we don't provide abortions after viability. So, but I certainly, it's in my experience at Planned Parenthood, we haven't ever had that kind of circumstance.
But you would say that there would be medical care would be in order at that point? Forget about Planned Parenthood, just generally.
Well, I'd say, I mean, again, I want to be responsible for Planned Parenthood and what we do there. Certainly in this situation, which again has never occurred that I know of a baby born, that baby should, as the mother should, get appropriate medical care from the physician.
Now, have you watched all the videos released by the Center for Medical Progress?
I haven't watched the multi-hour edited videos, but I have read all of the written transcripts.
So the ones that are on YouTube, you haven't watched those? I know there have been a series.
Well, there have been like hours and hours and hours, so I haven't, I mean, I did read through all I've watched many of the videos, and I've read through all the transcripts that have been provided. Again, I would say it's important that my position is I would like to see all of the videos that are not edited, and those haven't been provided.
What about, there was one specific one that there was a technician, Holly O'Donnell, and she was describing harvesting the brain of a late-term boy. She said she wasn't sure if the baby was alive since its heart was still beating, and then she harvested the brain by cutting his head open, starting with the chin. Do you recall that?
That woman does not work for Planned Parenthood, so I can't really speak to anything that she said. I'm not responsible for her.
Do you deny that her description of what happened is something that does occur in Planned Parenthood clinics?
Absolutely. I've never,
affiliates?
there is nothing that she's ever described that I could attest to has ever happened, and
So you can categorically testify to that then?
Categorically testify to what? Because I would be very careful what you're asking.
That what she describes is
well, I don't
something
remember that
would occur.
particular video of Holly O'Donnell, but I will tell you she has never worked at Planned Parenthood, and I have.
She was a technician for STEM Express, but I think it was something that was very, very troubling to sit there and read that, or to sit there and watch that video. But let me ask you this: do you admit that Planned Parenthood or its affiliates harvests and sells fetal body parts for profit?
We are very clear at Planned Parenthood. We have a very clear policy on fetal tissue donation. It's done with the full consent of the patient. And as I said earlier in my statements, it is only currently done in fewer than 1% of Planned Parenthood health centers.
But no
And in
profit.
one affiliate in Washington State that does not receive any reimbursement for their costs. And there's only one other one, which is in California. And they have assured us that whatever reimbursement they receive, it is less than what the costs are for providing fetal tissue to that organization.
If that's the case, then the video with Dr. Gutter negotiating over the price of the parts, if there's no profit being made, then why would you be negotiating over how much the parts are going to be sold for?
Well, with respect, I completely disagree with your characterization of that, and that is why I read all of the transcripts, the full, not these edited, sensationalized videos. And what I read, because we take this very seriously, I read over and over. Over and over.
I understand.
I just disagree with your characterization.
And that's fine, and people can judge for what it is. Let me ask you this. Do you deny that Planned Parenthood and or its affiliates will alter abortion procedures in order to better harvest fetal body parts?
We have a very clear policy, which I'm happy to read to you, about how we allow patients to make fetal tissue donations. Would you like me to?
So since the release of the videos, have you or the Planned Parenthood Federation issued any updated guidance to the companies to whom you provide fetal tissue regarding the sale of fetal body parts for profit and or the manipulation of abortion procedures?
Well, there's no way to answer that because I disagree with your formulation. We allow women voluntarily.
Have you issued any new guidance within the past 3 months?
No, although as I said in my letter to Congress, I've asked our Chief Medical Officer and our medical team to review all the work we do, and again, it's very limited in fetal tissue donation, to ensure that if there are any things that we could be doing better, we would like to do that.
My time's expired.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. A couple of things preliminarily. Number one, there is a sharp disagreement on members of this committee about abortion, and I think each side is entitled to mutual respect. There is a significant disagreement about fetal tissue research, and each side is entitled to respect. What is clear is the law says abortion is legal, and the law has limited authorization for fetal tissue research. That's the law. What Planned Parenthood is doing is completely consistent with the law. We're now having an argument about a video that has been redacted and doctored. There's no dispute about that. All of us would like to get the entire video. And in a prudent investigatory process, we would get the evidence before we argued about the evidence that we don't have. So that is a limitation on our ability to get, quote, to the truth. Second, I'm just going to speak for Vermont. 16,000 women voluntarily choose to get their primary health care from Planned Parenthood. These are individuals of free will, acting on the basis of what they believe is in the best interest of them getting the health care that they need. Second, the proposal here that we could transfer the services that Planned Parenthood provides to our community health centers doesn't stand up in Vermont. We have community health centers that we're very proud of. Senator Sanders, Senator Leahy, and I have all been big promoters. But its clientele is a significantly different population than women who have made a choice to go to the Planned Parenthood for their women's health care issues. So this proposed remedy here would have an incredibly negative impact on the choice that Vermont women make about getting their basic health care. And by the way, that health care that's important to the woman who decides to go to Planned Parenthood is really appreciated by her family, their partners in the community. So what is Congress doing here? We're having an argument that's never going to end about abortion. but we're proposing to proceed in a way where the effect of our, quote, investigation is going to have collateral consequences that compromises the ability of women to get access to basic health care needs. And it's also in the context where it's undisputed that the services that Planned Parenthood provides have helped reduce dramatically teen pregnancies and other pregnancies. So I think we should all take a step back here and think about what we do before we act. The first medical principle that all doctors follow: do no harm. Ms. Richards, I do want to ask you a couple of questions. This alarming inquiry about whether you were selling for, or Planned Parenthood was selling for profit body parts. We've seen a proposed contract from Mr. Deladian to send Planned Parenthood affiliate in Colorado earlier this year offering to buy tissue samples. And that contract included a compensation clause. Were you familiar with that document?
Yes, I am.
And in response, your affiliate removed the word compensation and added the following text, and I quote, "The payments shall not, under any circumstances, be calculated in such a way as to generate a profit for source." So, Ms. Richards, is that what the affiliate did, and was that the strict policy of Planned Parenthood?
So that's a very good example of what happened across the country. This group who, as I said, are committed to, they weren't really committed to rooting out any misdeeds. They were actually trying to entrap doctors and clinicians into signing bogus contracts and breaking the law. And so this example is a very good one of where they were completely rebuffed, and yet they continued to badger and badger and badger our doctors to try to get them to commit to something that was unethical or illegal.
And after your affiliate sent that deletion of the word compensation, did Mr. Deladian agree to the terms, or did he lose interest?
There was never a contract, that I know of that was actually sent back.
Let me ask another question about a failed attempt by Mr. Deladian. On July 20, you sent a letter to Chairman Upton. You said this, quote, "In another instance, Biomax offered to pay much more, sending the affiliate a procurement agreement that offered a payment of $1,600. Your letter says this was a, quote, astronomical amount compared to the reasonable cost affiliates are allowed to recoup under federal law. Is that right?"
I don't have that in front of me, but it sounds, to the best of my knowledge, it's correct.
All right. I see that I'm out of time, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Walker, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Richards, for being here today. I appreciate your testimony. I am also married to a strong lady. She is a family nurse practitioner. Helped launch the sexual assault nurse examiner program at Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center many years ago. But we stand together. We have done work in our inner cities and places like Cleveland and Baltimore and New York. And I'm troubled with some of the statistics that we've even seen out of New York. And maybe you can address that. I want to talk over you. I want to give you a chance to respond. But according to New York Health Department statistics, we now know that there are more African-American babies that are aborted in New York than actually born alive. Are you aware of that statistic?
I'm not aware of that statistic.
Okay. If that is correct, would that concern you? Because obviously Planned Parenthood has more clinics in New York State than any other state.
Actually, that's not true. We do not.
What is the #1 leading state that you have?
I believe it's California. I'll have to look, though, to make sure.
But if you know that's not
and
true.
And it's not only, I mean, Planned Parenthood, there are a number of healthcare providers in the state of New York beyond Planned Parenthood. It's one of the better served.
I understand, but we've already established that somewhere between 30 and 40% of all abortions come from your organization. So if we're going to put out the stats, we want to make sure that we're talking correct on the numbers.
And I do think, Mr. Walker, it's a really important point, because I think one of the other, I'm not what all the statistics are that you have, but of course the lack of access for African American women in particular to basic preventive health care, including family planning, is a huge problem in this country.
It is, and I don't want to spend, and I agree with you. That's as a aforementioned time of places that we've served and worked in. But it does concern me that 3 times the African American population is 13%, yet they're being aborted 3 times % of the population at 35%. That should concern all of us. I'm sure it concerns you as well. I do have a specific question regarding the $32 million that's sent overseas. Does Planned Parenthood send any funds to the Democratic Republic of Congo?
You know, this was asked earlier, and
We did touch on it, but I want to come back to it.
I have to
Yes.
get back. Honestly, I didn't bring materials about our international global program. I would have to get back to you that. I'm not trying to evade it. It's just not something that I thought was a topic of the committee meeting.
Well, I hope you would, because we have laws in this country that permit or prohibit us from sending money to places where we have sanctions on, and if Planned Parenthood is doing that, I would imagine that would be something that would concern you, would it not?
We certainly comply with all the laws, both globally and domestically, and that's why I commit to you. I will get information. We'll work with the committee to get information about the Congo.
Fair enough. I have a question. As a former pastor, 15 years in a couple large churches, there are many times where we counseled women at different ages, various ages, for different things that we're going through. Sometimes 15, 20, 25 years later, after going through an abortion, there was still some struggle there. I don't disparage these women for making tough choices. As you've talked about, many have come from underprivileged communities, didn't even feel like they had options. But of the $500 million of the taxpayers' money that goes to your organization, how much of that is set aside to offer counseling to some of those women who are still struggling with that issue?
Well, we don't, this is what it's really hard to explain to you, because I feel like we're talking past each other. We don't get a big check from the federal government. We're reimbursed for direct services, but they're all family planning, STD testing, women visit. I will say, though, one area I think you and I might agree, I would love in this country if we would fully fund, for Planned Parenthood or anywhere else, comprehensive counseling services for women on a whole host of issues. It is very underfunded, and it is really important to us as well, because we do counseling with women every single day.
I understand that, and I agree that there are some legitimate services offered, but this is something that I saw for 15 years. So of the $1.3 billion in revenue, even if it doesn't come from taxpayers, how much of that is set aside to offer these services of women who are seeking counseling?
Well, we counsel, I don't know how, I could get the numbers for you. We counsel women and young people and men every single day at Planned Parenthood health centers all across the country, and most of it, as you probably know, is uncompensated care.
Well, I look at your numbers, and I would tell you this, it is amazing as far as the amount of revenue that exists, and that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about how much you're sending overseas. But I do have one final question. This is a big if there is proven to be criminal activity through an investigation, would you have any problem redirecting the $500 million or the $60 million or the 20% that's not Medicaid? Would you have any problem redirecting that to other women's health care organizations who are offering genuine health care?
Well, I'm not going to answer to a hypothetical, and again, we follow all the laws at Planned Parenthood. The health and safety of our patients is our #1 concern. If there is any issue ever, the state or local, national level, we will address it, and we do so swiftly, and we always have.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. I yield back.
Thank you. Now I will recognize the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Plaskett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ranking Member Mr. Cummings. Thank you, Ms. Richards, for being here for the inordinate amount of time that you have. And I reiterate so much of what my colleagues here on this side of the aisle have said regarding this hearing and some of the concerns. You and your office know that I vocalized to you privately the fact that I'm displeased that Planned Parenthood is not present in my own district in the Virgin Islands or in any of the territories which have approximately 4 million people. And the reason I'm displeased about that is because I know the good work that Planned Parenthood does in preventative health for its women, with the Virgin Islands having 141 unplanned teen pregnancies per 1,000, when the national rate is 29 pregnancies per 1,000. I see how important the work that you guys do is to different areas. And, you know, the chairman has 7 clinics in his area in Utah. And, Mr. Chairman, we'd be glad to take any one of them in the Virgin Islands to be able to support women's health and the work that you do, knowing that 78% of those 7 clinics are in rural areas. And I know that this committee is searching for truth, and that's the purpose of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And I believe that we need to do that in a neutral and even-handed manner that reflects the integrity of this committee, which is why I think that this is a premature committee hearing, if not the fact that the other side, The individual that the minority has requested to be here, Mr. Daliaden, is not here. And while I understand that Mr. Daliaden has had restrictions on the videos being produced, he has not produced one document that has been requested by this committee from either side. Ms. Richards, do you know how many documents, how many pages of documents Planned Parenthood has produced for this
Will the
committee?
gentlewoman yield?
No, not at this time, sir. Afterwards, I will leave you some time.
Well, I know thousands and thousands of pages
I
of
think
documents.
it's 20,000 pages. And I know that the ranking member Cummings has sent a request for documents, and the chairman, Chaffetz, and Representative Jordan have sent their own requests for documents, and a subpoena was issued, and it has not. Not one page of documents, although I understand that from the testimony that the videos were, in fact, there was a question regarding that. And so, Ms. Richards, I want to ask you some questions since we only have Planned Parenthood here, and we only have your documents that we're able to put up and put up on screens and for you to be questioned about, not the other side, which as an attorney is a little problematic for me to be able to get to the truth if I don't see both sides of the evidence being presented to me. I understand that there are several states that have launched investigations against Planned Parenthood. Is that correct?
Well, there have been a variety of, I mean, we're constantly being overseeing our healthcare services. And yes, I think as a result of this recent campaign, there have been various state
And I understand that several of those states have cleared Planned Parenthood of any wrongdoing.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that there has not been produced any credible evidence that your organization has broken a single law. Is that correct?
I believe that's true.
And however, there's plenty of evidence that Mr. Daliaden and his associates have violated both federal and state laws. One example is his group obtaining tax-exempt status and apparently solicited charitable contributions under false pretense. Ms. Richards, are you aware that the Center for Medical Progress obtained a 501c3 status, as I quote, a biomedicine or bioengineering organization?
Well, all I know is what I've read in the paper about the organization.
And that, in fact, is a fake organization that filed official paperwork with the state of California to create a sham tissue procurement company called Biomax Procurement Services, LLC. Ms. Richards, as far as I know, illegally filing false paperwork with a state agency it's illegal and against the law, right?
It may be. I don't know. And I know there's a lawsuit now pending, and I think the Attorney General of California has indicated that there will be an investigation.
And so for me, for us to have this discussion with you without having the balance of the other side becomes problematic. Mr. Chairman, did you want to say something at this point?
Yes, I thank the gentlewoman for yielding that she made a suggestion that Mr. Daliaden had not been responsive to our inquiries. That's not true. We issued a subpoena, responded within the time. That package that arrived has not been opened. It's in our safe. He's unable to provide all of the documents given that there is a temporary restraining order. We understand that. House counsel's involved. Mr. Cummings and I evidently agree on this point that we're trying to get all of that information. But to suggest that he was non-responsive is simply not true because he did respond within the time allocated under the subpoena.
Well, it's my position, Mr. Chairman, that until you're able to open all of those documents and receive all of them, and we're able to balance them against the documents, the 20,000 pages of documents produced by Planned Parenthood, that this is an unfair hearing and that we're not getting a balance and able to do that.
I agree that we need all the information. That's why Mr. Daliaden was not invited to this hearing. The subject is exactly what I said in my opening comments and statements, of which many members have inquired about. It's the funding component. We did not title this hearing as a hearing on the videos. It caused some controversy, but we have, in the essence of time, some legitimate discussion about a continuing resolution and ongoing funding for Planned Parenthood, and we've laid that out. But my comments were not about the video, it was about the funding. That's where my concern lies.
Mr.
And
Chairman.
we will get to, hopefully, see all of those videos, but we've got to get past the restraining order that has been put in place by a judge in California.
Mr. Chairman, if we're going to discuss funding and knowing that members of Congress can sit here and ask questions that run the gamut and that funding question is related to those videos, which are the genesis of the question of whether to defund, then I think it's a little naive of us to think that that discussion can be done in a vacuum without the videos and the other documents from the other side.
The
I
gentleman
think
will
that
yield.
my time is up.
Would the gentlelady yield with the,
Sure,
with
go
the
ahead.
chairman's indulgence? In fairness to the gentlelady, I'm looking at the memorandum from the majority, and it talks about background for this hearing. And the first sentence on the background says, recently released videos demonstrate Planned Parenthood Federation of America participates in transactions involving transferring fetal tissue for remuneration. And then it goes on. But let me just very briefly, so that the record is clear. The gentlelady referred to documents that we had not received. And again, I'd like to briefly clarify one point on the record because it is important for the committee members to understand, and I'll be very brief. On Friday afternoon, the Republican staff informed Democratic staff that Mr. Daleiden sent them a package, a FedEx box, but they said that they did not want to open it until this week. We thought this was strange because if the Republicans delayed opening this package, members would not have had enough time to review whatever was inside before today's hearing. So our staff also made it clear that if the Republicans wanted to use any of this material at today's hearing, it should be open immediately on Friday, so we could begin to reviewing it as soon as possible through the weekend. But the Republican staff told us that they wanted to just keep the box closed. They said they would not open it and they would not use it at the hearing. So, as of this moment, we still do not know for sure what is inside that box from Mr. Daleiden. However, we did receive a copy of minutes from a recent hearing in a lawsuit in California where Mr. Daleiden's attorneys apparently told the court in that case that they delivered additional video footage to our committee, so even more footage that Mr. Daleiden cut from the videos he's released publicly. So we want to open the package. We want members to have equal access to the videos that are apparently inside, and we definitely want to see what the other footage Mr. Daleiden was concealing from the public. And I'll yield back.
Yeah, I want to see all the videos, too. That's why we issued a subpoena. I wish you all had supported us when we issued it.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I've said it before, and I don't want to.
I'm glad to have your support now.
I don't want to belabor
glad
it.
to have
No,
your
it's
support
not now. We've supported, and I can show you the documents to show you that we have asked that we get all of the tapes. And I will certainly, if you give me a few minutes while others are asking questions, I'll give you the very documents that we sent you showing that. Okay.
All right, we're going to go now to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman, and I'll try and make my Democrat colleagues happy and ask funding questions that have nothing to do with the videos. How about that? Which is more important to you, Ms. Richards, actually providing women's health care services or lobbying?
Well, I think these two things go hand in hand, and certainly what we have learned over the years is that in order to be able to provide health care services to women, you have to also be able to advocate, particularly for women who are underserved. So I think the two things actually go hand in hand.
Fair enough. You spent $21 million on lobbying in the last couple of years. You spent $0 on mammograms. Why is that?
Well, I think we've discussed mammograms repeatedly and how women's health care works. So when I go to my doctor, I get a breast
do a
exam.
referral, I get that. Why
and
don't you do them?
We refer to
Why don't you do them?
Well, we're not a radiological clinic, and I actually don't think that's an...
Why not? That's a woman's service.
Well, I guess we could take it up, but we never have provided mammograms because we work in concert with folks who do provide radiological services.
You're
We
aware,
do
by
a
the
number
way,
of breast exams.
You're aware, by the way, there's people running for president saying that you do provide mammograms, and that's not accurate, is it?
Well, there are a number of people running for president saying a lot of things that
On that
I
side.
can't certainly...
You said earlier that you don't make any money from federal funds, right? You don't make any profit off the federal funds. Is that correct?
So Planned Parenthood is a national office. We have one source of federal funding right now. It's a $21,000 roughly grant for a birth control clinical trial where we're actually reimbursed for costs alone, and that's the only source of federal resources that come to the national office. So we couldn't make a profit off that.
Where's the $532 million going?
So Medicaid and Title X.
So when you said you don't make any money off the federal funds, you were talking about the parent, not about your operations.
I was trying to explain that the national office, and then we have 59 affiliates, we have 650 to 700 health centers that provide health care services.
Is it your testimony that none of those make any profit off of federal funds?
Well, I would have to, they're all reimbursed for services that they provide, and my
provides them a
experience
profit,
has been,
right?
Excuse me?
That provides a profit. You get reimbursed for services.
Well, we're a nonprofit, so that's.
You're a nonprofit that made $127 million last year.
We didn't make money. We don't make money. We actually reinvest money in healthcare services and education and
Okay, so good.
a lot of other things.
Let's talk about that.
I wanted to answer your
I want to follow up on that
first
question. Now let's go on to this one. You just mentioned that you don't make money, but you had revenues in excess of your expenses of $127 million last year. That's right. That's your testimony.
We
It's your
raised-
numbers. Right. So here's my question. I'm going to get to the question if you let me. Where does the money go? Where does that $127 million go?
So like any organization of our size and scale, a lot of our resources are in what is a board-designated endowment or reserve. We are a 99-year-old organization, and so we've built our endowment. But also, I'm investing.
So you retain those earnings. In the private sense, you would retain those, or you put them in the bank.
Well, I hope they're in the bank and not just laying around, but I certainly, in addition to that, so some are in reserves, and the other is I've just invested in expanding health care services and building new clinics in a variety of states across the country.
How is
That's
that not an
paid for.
expense?
Excuse me?
How is that not an expense?
Well, it is an expense.
No, but your books reflect revenues in excess of expenses of
Well,
$127 million.
I'm sorry, they're not all out the door, but I've made commitments to opening up new health centers in New Orleans, in Dallas, in other states in the South, we're opening in other states that I won't mention here probably because it would just cause more attention.
Services. Okay, so let's say that money goes towards expanding their service. One of the proposals here, Ms. Richards, is to defund Planned Parenthood, which includes taking $60 million, roughly $60 million away from what you get out of discretionary funding. If we took $60 million away from you could still perform every single service that you gave last year, can't you?
I can't say that because those.
Well, you made 120. You said you have revenues in excess of expenses of $127 million. Now you told me what you do with $127 million. You're spending it. You're investing it. You're expanding. I get that. But if you had $60 million less last year, you could have provided every single service to every single woman that you did last year.
Well, I constantly raise money to expand services to the patients that look to us, and so
And God bless
I
you.
don't.
And I think that's great. But answer my question, please. You could have provided every single service that you did to every single woman last year if you did not get a penny from the discretionary fund from the United States Congress.
Well, I actually disagree, and there's no way I could agree to that. These are services that are spread out all across the country, and I can't possibly account for how each dollar that I raise,
still
some of
would
which
have
is
had
committed to other services and expansion of services, could simply replace federal
Not
dollars.
expansions of service. I'm talking about services you actually provided. You would have had $67 million.
Well, we're expanding services beyond what we already provide.
Got that. Not my question. My question is, if we had not funded you last year, you still would have been able to provide the services. And I think the answer is unequivocally yes. You might not have been able to expand your services, but every single woman that walked into every single clinic would have been served if you had not received that money from Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I disagree, but
And we're just trying to figure out why you would disagree with that. Revenues would still exceed expenses, even with $60 million less.
so do you want me to start talking? Are we now having this conversation? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if we're finishing this.
Sure.
So I raise money every single day to expand services and education services to people in America. That's what we do at Planned Parenthood. And like any other nonprofit, we reserve money for all kinds of services that need to be expanded, assistance that needs to be provided, and that's what we do with our money. We're a nonprofit. We don't do anything else with our money other than put it back into the services, the education, and sometimes the advocacy that we provide.
We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Lujan Grisham, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Richards. And if this committee is going to undertake how Medicaid money is used and not used by every health care provider in every state and every local government in the United States, it might be a very interesting hearing about how we can assure that the Medicaid funds that are not reaching so many still, even with the progress of the Affordable Care Act, so many women and so many families, that would be a hearing that I think would be well worth having. I'm going to go back to both the funding aspects here, the unintended consequences, and really I appreciate the comments of all of my colleagues, but Mr. Welch and Mr. Boyle. I served as the New Mexico Secretary of Health, and one of my challenges was certainly to deal with teen pregnancy, but also to make sure that we had the right partnerships and viable access in a public health system where women and their families could get access to health care services that were of high quality and services that they trust. I can tell you something you already know, that without Planned Parenthood, we could not meet those access points, and quite frankly, even in the public health system, there are many women, particularly in rural and frontier areas of the state, who A, did not have access or would absolutely under no circumstances choose that access, where I'd like to tell you that our record about prevention and preventing pregnancy was better in the public health system. And that was in a world where we didn't have the 2008 budget issues, where our state now is not putting money into public health or expanding public health or working on women's health care. And without the Affordable Care Act, our rural hospitals and community health centers would all but be closed. And I will tell you that we now have the highest teen pregnancy rate in the country, with efforts at looking at what we can do for 15-year-olds to prevent the second and third pregnancy. Women need and deserve unfettered, high-quality, confidential access to comprehensive health services. And I'm hearing from hundreds of constituents, and I also know that thousands of New Mexico women and their families will not have access to these services because it is all connected, and even if it wasn't, would still want them to have the choices that they make that are right for them. But with all of the funding issues that we debate in this Congress, I know unequivocally that they don't have access in many of the places that they should, and under the Equal Protection Clause, they certainly ought to with Medicaid funding. Can you talk a little bit more about what states like New Mexico, with these high teen pregnancy rates, without public health access, without those rural access points, where would those 21,000 women go?
Well, I thank you for your service in the public health arena and for your question. I do think it's incredibly important that we're constantly looking at new ways to help particularly young people access information and services. And it sort of goes back to the chairman's question maybe earlier, which is one of the things we do at Planned Parenthood, in addition to providing Medicaid family planning services and other, is we now run education programs all across the country and through the web that have an average of 6 million visitors every single month, and visited by young people and by their families, English and in Spanish, because many people don't have access to adequate sex education in their communities. In addition, we are looking at more ways to provide birth control through virtually, so that actually you can order it online and don't have to be in a clinic, because for many rural Americans, it's very difficult to access a family planning provider in your community. So those are the kinds of things.
Not there. I have a pastor in my district who's let me know that he refers women to Planned Parenthood because he knows that there aren't the right community access points. And I know it's been touched on in this committee, but I have personal experience and know many of my constituents in their 20s and 30s and 40s who, without the comprehensive health care services, would have died from cervical cancer. And I know exactly how important, again, in a state that has higher per capita averages in many of these cancer areas for these populations, and particularly for minority populations, that we want to do a much better job investing in comprehensive health, simply do not have it. And the notion that we would continue to discriminate against those populations by not providing adequate federal funding and access makes no sense if what we're trying to do is to maintain my choice about my high-quality confidential provider. Thank you, Ms. Richards, for being here today. I appreciate your testimony.
Thanks for letting me be here. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, members are advised we have 2 votes on the floor. There are approximately 8 minutes left in this first previous question vote. It's the intention of the Chair to recognize Mr. Heiss for his 5 minutes of questioning. Then we're going to go to recess. Then we're going to have to come back. We thought we could get through it, but we still have a number of members who have questions. So we'll now recognize Mr. Heiss for 5 minutes. Then we'll go into recess and we'll reconvene after the votes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Richards, just a point of clarification. It's already been established that Planned Parenthood serves a lot of underprivileged people. And I just want to be clear, in your testimony, you stated that it is significantly more difficult for individuals on Medicaid to access a provider as opposed to someone with a private insurance, because so many providers now are not accepting Medicaid. Is that correct?
Medicaid patients, it really varies across the country, but
across the
certainly there are some states where it's very difficult.
And that's one reason that you would say that Planned Parenthood is needed, because there's a gap there. Is that correct?
Well, I think I think we have tried to demonstrate that we are an important provider of Medicaid services to a lot of folks in this country.
But particularly the underprivileged. And
well, that's who, I mean, just I guess by definition, yes, that's
all right. So
on Medicaid.
you also said in your testimony that the Government Accountability Office found that about 2/3 of the states are challenged now recruiting OB/GYNs because of the difficulty in ensuring provider participation in Medicaid, and that, according to the CBO, this again is in your testimony, that by next year, Obamacare is expected to reduce the uninsured, and nearly half of those are going to be on Medicaid. So from these testimonies or these statements in your testimony, is Medicaid, in your opinion, a substandard insurance?
In my opinion, is it no?
Is it an inferior product?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. I think it's important that Medicaid
Well, this is according to your testimony, and I just want to know.
No, I don't think I said that, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're asking. I think that it's important that Medicaid patients be able to get the same kind of quality of care as other
But you said
insured
they
people.
can't. They're not able to, because so many providers are not. Let's go on to some other things. I was just curious, and those were some questions that I had jotted down. It seems to me that there's a question mark there. You praise it on one end, Medicaid, and then
very important.
say it's a problem on the other,
No,
and that's why.
It's not, so I hope I didn't misstate that. I don't think Medicaid is a problem. I think the challenge is, because the reimbursement rates are very, very low in many states, there are not enough doctors and healthcare providers that will take new Medicaid patients. That's something everyone struggles with.
Let's go further. I do have some other questions. We've also established today that there has been some excess revenue, as you describe it, other than saying profit, excess revenue, nearly $750 million in the last 10 years, $127 million last year. We can break that down in a number of different ways. And yet, at the same time, the dramatic reduction in prenatal care, preventive services, cancer screening, and so forth. And do you have any idea, by the way, how many Planned Parenthood clinics have closed over the last 10 years?
I don't have those exact numbers, and you're referring to a lot of things. I'd have to go back and look at charts where I think we've addressed, and although I know not everyone is here for all of it, why some women's health care services aren't needed on an annual basis anymore. But many of our Planned Parenthood health centers have merged to be more efficient. We were started 99 years ago, and I will be candid, there's not always total efficiency.
Okay, well, let me go on. There's been over 100 that have closed just over the last.
Or merged, well, I would say, or
closed
merged.
and merged, whatever. But the bottom line is, you stated just a few moments ago that this $127 million, $750 million over the last 10 years, that you're largely holding it and using it for investment purposes. Why is it on the taxpayer's hook to provide for your investments in expansion when you are declining your services and clinics are closing?
I don't think the federal government isn't investing in our expansion. In fact, the federal government,
you've got $127 million over the last year that's excess.
That was none of that is federal dollars. I'm sorry, that's all raised by private.
All right, so we have $60 million that are federal dollars that comes through the discretionary fund. Why does the taxpayers need to be providing $60 million when you've got $127 million a year. I mean, I'm just going back to the question already asked. I'm trying to find why is the taxpayer responsible for your expansion?
I'm not holding the taxpayers responsible for our expansion. In fact, the money that is paid for by the federal government through Medicaid, through Title X, through CDC grants, through HIV/AIDS programs, all pay for services directly provided to patients. And there's strict accountability, and we are accountable by HHS, looks at all the Medicaid payments. So this is, we're grateful for the opportunity to serve patients who come into us on those programs. I think we provide very high quality, and that's why patients continue to come to us. And I think patients, regardless of whether they're on Medicaid or not, should have the option to go to the healthcare provider of choice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. The committee will now stand in recess and reconvene no sooner than 2 p.m., but will be beholden to the conclusion of these votes. Committee stands in recess.